Hello, podcast listeners. Welcome to the very first episode of Grassroots Radio. I'm Unique Bird, the host of this show, and I'm so pleased to have you joining me today. Thank you so much to everyone who's listening. This podcast is a project of the new Grassroots, and it's all about highlighting the positive side of life and youth culture in Antigua and Barbuda. And we're doing this through interviews with exceptional young Antiguans and Barbudans about how they see the world, the challenges they're facing, and what motivates them to keep working towards a bright future for our country, region, and the world. Our very first guest is Kadeem Joseph, a 27-year-old media professional with over 10 years of experience. He's also a medical student at the American University of Antigua and an award-winning creative writer, poet, singer, and gender activist. And we get into a little bit of everything. So without further ado, let's take a listen.
First and foremost, I am a social activist. I'm a volunteer. I love volunteering. I think it's a part of what we need to do as citizens of the globe, not just Antigua, but as members of this world, that we're trying to make better. Outside of that, I'm a writer and spoken word artist. I also sing and act. I am also a gender advocate and youth advocate. So it's I have a multifaceted sort of life between being a medical student and handling all of the other things that I have interests in.
Indeed, you are a very busy young man. How exactly do you make all those things work in your life? What would you say is a typical day in the life of Kadeem?
I think generically when I'm asked that, I kind of say, it works, or I'm disciplined, or something of that sort. But really, on many occasions, it really doesn't work, if I'm to be honest, in the sense that I have all of these moving parts in my life. And all of these random obligations, whether it be in school or in the arts, in the world of arts. But sometimes, in most cases, things just happen to fall into place. Because I've found as I have continued through school and school has gotten a bit more busy and engaging, other things take a backseat. So it really doesn't work, but I have been able to push myself through to ensure that I'm where I need to be at the time I need to be there.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're a very good example of kind of how to get all these different things done. Obviously, you're not doing all these things simultaneously, but when you have time off on one, you can fit another one in.
Exactly. And it's odd because I think for most individuals, their downtime is perhaps watching TV, reading a book, going to the beach. But I consider my downtime from school my work in other areas. So if I have some time, I'd probably go write something for some sort of event. So that way, I am giving time to everything. It's not always great in terms of my resting periods, but at least at the end of the day, I feel a bit more fulfilled.
Right. That was one of the things I was going to ask you. Are you the kind of person that feels like you need to fill your time in this way? Like, if you do have that kind of downtime where I don't have anything to do, I could just, take a nap or do nothing or go to the beach and just, chill completely. Is it that you would prefer to be doing something that's a little bit more active or a bit more engaging to just kind of having the 100% down time?
I do prefer to be engaged. And the reason is that when I was very young, both my parents were always on the go to the extent that they had things to do. My dad He worked. He had cattle that he looked after. So
Mm-hmm.
there was never really downtime for him until he came home and was just tired. You know, my mom, she worked. She was a homemaker as well, and she juggled things so much. And they were always very keen on impressing on me that, hey, you were given these talents, and it's up to you to make the life you want with these talents. So I've always felt that obligation to use the talents that I've been given in a proactive way and in a productive way. I think if you look at individuals who have achieved extreme success, they are individuals who have realized that they have this gift, and they go above and beyond to ensure that that gift is seen by whomever needs to
Mm-hmm.
see it. So I always have that in the back of my mind. I'm not necessarily from an affluent family, so I have done everything in my power to position myself in places that would allow me to access opportunities that I otherwise would not have.
So a lot of young people will say, in Antigua, it's kind of boring, not too much going on. It's hard to find opportunities and avenues to do what you did, which is kind of insert yourself and make sure that you're well positioned to realize your various dreams and aspirations. I
Mhm.
guess, how did you find all these different avenues? The story might be different for each one, but kind of, do you have a system for seeking out opportunities and then going after them? Just for people who might be interested in doing similar things.
You raise an interesting point about individuals, especially young people, growing bored really quickly. And it's something I laugh at all the time with my friends who are like, "Oh, I'm bored. I'm home. I'm bored." I'm like, what is this boredom that you speak about? Because I don't know it.
Mm.
For me, again, and kudos again to my parents who are very. They're not. I can't remember the term, but they don't necessarily, they're not trying to push me in everything at every single moment to ensure that I'm occupied all the time. Or that wasn't them growing, or when I was growing up. But they were very good at letting me know that I could do things.
Mm.
They were good at recognizing potential. Let me say that.
Right,
And
right.
in that way, I always felt that I had the mechanism, the support to try different things. So, for instance, when I was in primary school, around grade 6 or grade 5, there was a
What
radio.
primary school did you go to?
I went to the Jennings Primary School, the best primary school in the world. But
Not going to argue.
back then, there was a radio program on ZDK called The Paula Show, hosted by Paula Lee. And my dad heard of the show, and he called me up. He's like, "Oh, Kadeem, there's this show where young people can call in, and they are asked questions, they earn points, and they get gifts in the end." And
Mm-hmm.
that was my first foray into radio, so to speak. And
Right.
I would call in every time. It was a weekly thing, and I won my first, was it computer? Yeah, I won my first computer through that. I
Okay.
think it was a computer. I can't remember, but I want something really unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
And phone plans and internet and all of these things that I think then I would not have had access to had I not participated. And
Uh-huh.
then there was the Max and Company show on Observer Radio. And my dad also was like, "Hey, there's this other show that I think you should do, you would do well in." And I would call in every day, and there were different categories from poetry to answering science questions. Like the list went on. And I participated religiously, and again won things that I otherwise would not have had in my possession at that time. And that sort of mushroomed into something way bigger. So from a very early age, people knew my name, knew
Yeah.
who I was. My voice was recognizable, and I think that sort of shuttled me into different avenues where I was asked to speak at different events, do motivational speaking, and I was exposed to music, and it kind of opened the doors for someone who had already felt or had already been targeted or nabbed as someone who was multi-talented. So it was very easy for people to say, oh, hey, I know this person. Perhaps I should ask him to do this for me. And it mushroomed from there.
So you really showed yourself to be someone who had a lot of different skills and was very versatile. And so people were inviting you then to participate in more and more things.
That's correct, yes.
And so you started basically from calling in and participating in radio competitions, and that somehow landed you in actually working in the media.
Yes.
So how did that transition kind of happen? Mm-hmm.
And again, for young people out there who are listening, I think that volunteerism, participating in organizations and not-for-profit initiatives are really a setup for your own personal success. I remember back in the day, I used to hear Julian Rogers and Julius Gittins in the morning on Observer Radio and Sly J, and I used to mimic their voices. I really wanted to have a radio voice. I loved to listen to documentaries and the trailers for movies and hear that iconic voice. I like, who is this person that speaks like this? So I used to practice in the mirror and say things over and over and over again. And I say all that to say that my participation in these radio shows, I would have never imagined that they would have led me into the path that I did, that I ended up going along. I came back to Antigua in 2010 after my first foray into university, and I needed a quick job to support my medical school exploits. And I had already worked with Observer with developing a youth show and hosting their then junior cabinet. So I wasn't new to radio, but there was a friend who worked there at the time. I was like, explaining the situation. He was like, apply. You clearly have the talent. Just apply and we'll see what happens. I applied and I was employed as a journalist for the first year. I was on probation for the first 6 months, and I got employed full time for the first year. A year after that, and it's weird because, again, I'm so goal oriented. I had already committed within that year I needed to get a raise. It was just something that I wanted because I had never had a full job before, and I didn't understand how business worked and how you negotiated these things. I was like, okay, I need to get to a place where I show myself to be so good that a raise would not be something worth debating. It would be like, oh yeah, of course, you get that raise,
Yeah.
And I remember the meeting after my contract had ended, and I was like, look, for this particular period of time, I am now performing at this level. If you look at my performance, I am now producing this amount of work compared to my colleagues, and I think that I deserve a raise. And of course, it was like, oh wow, this was way easier than I expected it to be. Well,
you had your arguments all lined up, so
it was one of those things that I think young people generally. You have to know your worth. And I think a lot of young people struggle, especially in a place like Antigua, where we don't have a lot of avenues for upward movement. There's a lot of stagnation, especially in the public system. So you don't have that practice to say, hey, this is what I've been doing for you, for your company, for your establishment, and this is what I think I can do. This is the level I think I am performing, and I'm an asset to your company. I think you should consider treating me more or recognizing how much of an asset I am. So I quickly moved from being just a journalist to running the entertainment pages to producing Observer AM and Big Issues. And these are, of course, were all goals in my, I literally had a checklist of things that I wanted to accomplish within a
Okay.
particular time. And I pushed for them. I tried my best to perform. And before I knew it, I was senior. I was senior in the organization, and I was a producer of the news. So I am very proud of that gradual progression. Now I look back at how fast it happened and how committed I was to the process.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad that you mentioned negotiating for, what you think you're worth and framing it in terms of explaining or showing, not even explaining, you have to show, right? And actually be able to produce at that level and then ask for what you want and frame it as this is how I'm contributing. Because a lot of times people will think that they deserve a raise or promotion based on how much time they've spent in a place. I think that's one of the common kind of mistakes that people make. And it's not really about how long you've been there. It's about what you're contributing, the value of it, and the fact that you're doing that and people don't want to lose you, right? And that's the most important thing you can focus on as a young person.
Culturally, in Antigua, we don't have that sort of we don't have that sort of realization where we have competitive markets where you can aim for bigger. And again, as I said, we are mainly public sector driven. Our public sector is larger than our private sector.
By a lot.
Exactly. And you don't find that in that sector, there's regular evaluations, there are regular targets for you to meet in the average division of government. So I don't, if for individuals who have worked abroad and are accustomed to the culture of capitalist states, then they would have a different thrust in how they approach work. So I think while we like to say that we celebrate foreign things in Antigua more than we celebrate local people, I think as well, when you would have worked in the States and Europe and UK, you come back with a greater zeal to push to the top, and you know how to prove yourself in that way. Whereas there are several misconceptions to regular Antiguans who are thinking, okay, I have tenure. Tenure in the organization, so I should be the one who gets the promotion. I should be the one who is considered. But no, it's the individual who proves themselves to be of the greatest asset.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about your time away. You mentioned earlier that you started working at Observer after you returned from studies abroad. Where were you studying? What were you studying? How long were you there? Give us a picture of that.
Well, I left Antigua in 2010 to study medicine in the Kingdom of Morocco. That I was a part of the first batch of students who applied for that scholarship, and that too sort of fell into my lap because I was kind of wondering what was next in my life. What was the next thing? I knew I wanted to study medicine, and that had been my goal for the longest time. But I wasn't too sure how to get there, especially, as I said earlier, coming from a family who was not necessarily affluent. Medicine is a big thing to go into because of the financial commitment.
Yep, huge expense, huge amount of time.
So I wasn't too sure. And a government official realized that, I hadn't gone to UE. I was just around doing different projects. And they're like, there's this opportunity coming up. I think it would be good for you to get out of Antigua, have experiences, and come back. And that was a Moroccan scholarship. I left and I did 2.5 years, I think, in Morocco. And for my first year was studying studying French as a language. I went late, so I had 6 months of French, and thereafter, we had some complications in the systems under which we were registered. So,
as is often the case.
Yeah. So many of the Antiguans, many of the Caribbean individuals who had gone up there to do medicine were not given the option to do medicine, despite because to do medicine in Morocco, you would have had to pass your French examinations with an A. Let's say in their grading system, an A plus.
Okay.
So we did that, and then we were told you also don't meet the requirements because we in Antigua we do in the Caribbean we do the A level system. But they don't recognize that system over there. So you need to be a certain age, and your certification should not be over 2 years old by the time you enter medical school. So you could imagine having done A levels,
Yeah.
and then going to do a 6 month or a year course in French, that automatically would
Make you too old. Yeah, that ages you out. Oh my
so
gosh.
that was a bit of a shock for all of us.
Right, and you would think that that would be the kind of information that would be available to you at the time of your application to the program. I mean,
my parents are like, you know what, try to go through the science course. And there was a promise then that after we would have finished the first 2 years of that science course, we transition into the medical science program. My first semester was awful because of the whole hiccup with the medicine thing. We were registered after the midterms of the first semester.
After the midterms?
After the midterms. So we literally went, well,
oh my gosh.
Let's say we entered the week before the official midterms. Yes, I think that's what happened.
So still too late to take midterms. Right?
Yeah, so it already didn't make sense. We were already at a disadvantage. We would have already failed that semester. And I remember once, I hate telling the story because it was such a low moment in my life. We went to classes, and given that we were native English speakers, and then we learned French, we did not know Arabic, which was the one of the official languages of Morocco.
Right.
Moroccans speak Arabic than any other language. I remember the professor said, "Look, I have this amount of students who only speak Arabic and barely know French, and I have youth scholarship students who are coming here to learn
French.
You only know French, and I can your language of the official language of instruction is French, but so a lot of Moroccans would learn French just to have a higher degree, and many of them were not proficient enough to perform well. So he was saying, look, I am going to serve the greater good of my people, and I'm going to teach in Arabic. So
wow,
there was a lose-lose situation. There was no way
completely
we could have done anything. And I remember calling my mom and just bawling on the phone, like,
oh my gosh,
I don't know why I'm here, what I'm doing. Like, we just cannot win with these people. And she's like, you know what, bear with it, try your best. And I ended up spending the entire academic year and going back for, I think, 6 more months. And it got to a point where I was like, you know what, this no longer made sense. I'm not doing what I want to do. I can't be taught in French. It was too much. And things sort of spilled over into the media, and it became a big hoorah. And they asked the students who were in that situation to return, and we were placed elsewhere. And that's how I came back with only French certifications, and I started studying in Morocco. Well, that's after going to China to do a short course in diplomacy. But yeah, that was the progression.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that story, especially the difficult parts of it, because that's an experience that a lot of Antiguan students have when they leave and go on these scholarship programs, that, you know, lines get crossed and we don't know what we're doing here and people didn't expect us. That actually happened to my brother in Italy and a few other students. And they were kind of marooned for a while because they showed up there in the school, did not expect them. And so it was, yeah. And it's Italy. Like, they don't speak Italian. They're there to learn it. I feel like I need to recover from that story. Holy crap! Like,
It's a lesson in resilience, and coming
definitely.
back to Antigua, I was like, I really don't think I can do medicine again. It was such a leap of faith for me to do it, and to be so brutally shut down in the
Mm-hmm.
process. I was like, what's next? And yeah, there were other opportunities, and I just decided, you know what, this was your dream. And I think, again, being goal oriented, I think if I hadn't done everything in my power to pursue medicine, I would be disappointed in the future. So, uh, one of the things I've always said, and maintain even now, is I'm going to push as hard as I can for as long as I can. If this doesn't work out, then I cannot say that I didn't do my best.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the way I approach most things, because regret regret is something that, while other people may say, they don't live with regrets and so on, I know regret, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the feeling. So I try my best to do everything to the best of my ability, in order to have a more fulfilling experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think it's a really good mindset to have. And just talking to you, I'm realizing like it is so much about having the right outlook on things to keep going in those moments where things seem impossible, things get really stressful, and you're just like, how am I going to deal with this? And then is when you really need to have that kind of strong will and really know what you want and just keep pushing through it. Because even though that Morocco situation fell through and it wasn't what you were expecting, you still came out of it with French, right? Now you can speak French, you have that skill under your belt, and then you were able to move on to other things.
Yeah.
So you never know, even in failures, even if it's not a failure due to your own, action or will, you can still turn those situations around for the better.
Yeah.
And so I guess that kind of mindset and being the person that you are is one of the reasons why you're attracted to activism and kind of sharing that knowledge and those kind of skills with other people. So what was your first foray into that kind of world?
Well, oddly, I don't know myself outside of being an activist. I've just been always opinionated,
Mm-hmm.
and I blame my dad mostly. Because my dad, though he is a difficult parent to deal with, he is also he was also the individual who told us, all of his kids, that if there is something that is going wrong that you do not like, you have the responsibility and the right to say that you don't like it. Even if it's him, even if it was, you say, even if it's me, if you don't like something I'm doing, you can tell me. It's just a matter
Mm-hmm.
of how you're going to say it. You have to be respectful, but you have the right to speak up for yourself. And I think that sort of empowerment, he empowered us to stand up for ourselves and to be our own people. And that sort of led me to have a great appreciation for the space I occupied. And because again, being so young and being a part of so many different organizations and conversations on very big topics, young people are often overlooked. You're like the token youth in the group.
Yeah, very
Like, we
true.
need a young person to be in our group. Let's call this person.
Mm-hmm.
And you're expected to stay in your corner and be silent. And that just wasn't me. I think young people. I remember. I don't know if you remember growing up. There were in Antigua. There was this commercial that said, "Youth had a voice. Youth had a right to be heard." I think was the thing, and I have somewhat taken that on as almost a personal crusade, that young people have the unique opportunity to see things with fresh eyes. They're seeing the way our society is run with fresh eyes. They're seeing the government system with fresh eyes, and that freshness allows us to become the innovators of our time. And so often, adults become threatened by that voice of newness, that voice that says, "Hey, we've been doing this for so long. Perhaps we should try it this way, and perhaps we would get further with this approach." And I've made it my business to be that voice, to help in any way, shape, or form. So I can't tell you specifically when I became involved in service organizations for the first time, but I know that it has been a thing for me from primary school, right into high school when I joined Young Leaders and all of these other things. And then I started working with JCs, Red Cross, and doing mentorship programs and doing motivational speeches with different young people. It just went on. The aid secretariat. I just realized that there was a void, and again, I thought then and still do know that I see things differently to some people or a lot of people, and I think that if I were to be involved in certain projects, certain organizations, then I'd be a benefit. I'd be an asset, and I think that has allowed me to transition into these different organizations and to be of service. And as well, and I say this, and it's going to sound weird, but when I look at the news and you look at places like Yemen and now the Muslims in China and all of these big stories where there's injustice and it seems as if no one is doing anything. I'm the type of person who'd sit down for hours just like, how is the world allowed to carry on like this? You look at America, who is supposed to be the arbiter of all the things, democracy and free press, free people, free everything. The body of the world, the government of the world that will come into your country and tell you, hey, you're not at the standard of democracy or more. You don't have the moral high ground right now, and you need to come up to the standard that we need you to operate in. You have a situation right now where children are being literally separated from their parents at borders and being held in detention facilities. And at the same time, the same government is trying to intervene in the affairs of Venezuela and Syria and Iran. I'm like, how could this be a thing? How could the world operate in the way it's operating? And it baffles me. It really plays on my mind because I think a lot of us have a utopian view of where we are, but there are people literally in the world right now suffering because of poor decisions of poor leaders, and we turn a blind eye to it every single day. And I don't know what I can do. I haven't figured out the master plan in terms of what I can do to make these major changes that I want to see for the world, and not just Antigua, but really when I think of, and working in news has jaded me to these situations a lot. So like when I look at the landscape of the world, the political landscape and the economic landscape of the world, I really have a difficult time accepting that this is what life should be. So I try my best to keep the conversation going, and there's so many like-minded people that I'm able to now offload my stresses on and worries on. From Amaya Athil to Elijah James and all of these other young people out there, Carl and Knight, the new Grassroots family, all of whom I'm so impressed with. I'm so impressed with the movement and what the movement could be. It only inspires me more to keep pushing.
That's really beautiful. And I was smiling as you're talking, even about, the bleak things going on in the world, because that's one of the things that obsesses me and drives me as well, is just how did we let things get this way?
Yeah.
And I really believe that things don't have to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the really pivotal moments was just realizing that, hey, I have the ability to change things. And that came for me when I was working in this company. It was like a retail store and I was running their operations. And they were just throwing away so many like good products all the time. And they were literally paying people to sit down and destroy books so that people couldn't steal them out of the garbage. And I was like, what the heck is this? Like, this makes no sense. And people are like, oh, that's just how we do it. I'm like, we shouldn't do it that way.
Yep.
And I pushed and pushed and pushed until I got like a donation system set up where all these products like baby clothes and all that kind of stuff was being donated to local shelters that needed those things. It just seemed ridiculous that they were throwing them away. And then the company now gets to have the reputation of saying, oh, we don't do what all these other companies do. We actually recycle and donate and we're good corporate citizens. And just, it's a small thing and it's just one little thing, but I think that everyone has the power to kind of push for those little changes to be made. And it's just a matter of realizing that it's something that you can do. And I loved when you mentioned your dad telling you, as a small child, that if you don't like how something's going, you can say something about it. Like you still have your voice, even if you're a little kid and you can't necessarily do anything yet, you still have your voice. And we can never discount the power of people's voices.
And it's weird, like we all need that sort of support system behind us too, because it's one thing to believe that you can effect change, but when you try, there are all of these opposing voices, and you need that sort of support mechanism to say, "Hey, we got you." I remember back in the day, and I laugh about it now because it involves a prime minister, and there was a big thrust towards creating a national youth policy, and I was a part of the process. And after we had presented the policy, the policy was presented in Parliament. He wasn't. They weren't in government. The ALP, that is, they weren't in government at the time, and I remember then Gaston Brown had scathing criticisms for the national youth policy and how it worked. And I was.
Do you remember what any of the criticisms were?
Basically, he didn't think it was inclusive enough. It didn't go far enough for him, and he was also upset that the party or representatives from the party weren't involved in the process. Which again, I don't want to rehash that because it wasn't that. It wasn't that. I think it was just a moment to politic, and that's what politicians do.
Right.
So I was very upset about this. I was like early teens at the time, and I was livid. And I went home and I was complaining. I was like, "How could this happen? How could he say these things about this thing? We have worked so hard on this thing." And my dad was like, "You know what? Just write about it." And I wrote a letter to the host of Observer AM at the time, who was Missy Allen. And I thought it would have stopped there, but then it was published in the paper. And it became this huge debate, and I was being invited on talk shows to discuss this thing, and it became almost like a circus around something I said, and the people were questioning whether or not I wrote the letter or whether or not someone else wrote it for me, and it was rough. And I remember seeing PM Brown in Parliament thereafter, and he came up to me and he spoke about it, and he basically shrugged at my assertions, But again, I say all that with the understanding that no, I wouldn't say that we are friends, but I'm familiar with the PM. He recognizes him. He says howdy to me all the time, and I think there's a mutual respect. And I don't think that would be there had I not
Stood up.
or had I not positioned myself in public affairs in the way I did. So there needs to be that belief and that support in order for you to stand up, even to individuals that you admire. Because I have so much admiration for Gaston Brown as a administrator, as a politician, as a political figure. But I think Antiguans in general need to know that despite all of the political hoorah that we do, we are still Antiguans and Barbadians, and if we are desirous for the country to progress, then that means that we have to stand for something. Otherwise, all your rights, all of your dreams and hopes for this small island, this Trinidad Island state, it goes to nothing.
I don't want to stay on the politics too long, but just one point to that. One of the issues I see with politics and the way that they work in Antigua in particular is that it can be incredibly tribal. And what you're saying about, having disagreements with particular individuals who are politicians, and then being able to move outside of that and still have a mutual respect. I feel like a lot of times we get stuck in thinking that if you support somebody or you support a party, you have to agree with every single thing they say. You have to just toe the line and not really do the critical thinking for yourself about whether a particular policy is going to be a good thing, about whether some aspects of the policy are going to be problematic for you. We kind of outsource all of that, critical lens to, well, it's the party in charge, they should just do whatever they want. I think that's one of the places too where we need more voices to say, hey, I don't know if this is going the right way, or just suggesting like alternatives. Like, I think this could be better. I think this could be tweaked, etc.
And that's what's great about the new Grassroots. And again, in my head, I have a very clear view of what I think the group is and where I think the group should go.
Well, we should talk more about that.
I hope I'm not being too presumptuous, but
this movement is for the people who are part of it. So, take it away.
I think that as young people, we definitely need to network and to speak with each other. There is a clear body who says, hey, what you're doing isn't working, and this is our view on the matter. These are our findings, and this is what we think you should do. And it's not said in a vacuum, but there are so many brilliant young people here that can really help to revolutionize how we do things in Antigua. Without each other, that will never happen. So kudos to you guys. I think what you guys are on to is something that perhaps will propel Antigua into another era.
That means so much coming from you, especially. So thank you. And we are going to try to live up to that 100%. So where does art, and in particular your art and your creative pursuits, fit into this really comprehensive worldview that you've just been expounding and sharing with us?
I don't know where I'm going to be in the next 10 years with respect to my art. I know there are small goals. As I told you, I'm like goal oriented. So I always have these little things in my mind that I know I need to accomplish within a certain space of time. And for me, art informs life and vice versa. So a lot of the writing I do is from my life and from things I've observed. And I want to have a body of work that inspires others to speak up and speak out about very difficult topics, from molestation to rape to infidelity and depression and mental health. And most of my pieces surround those core topics. because I think we don't talk a lot about them. So my hope is to, in the very near future, put out a audiovisual project that features also spoken word and musical presentations that would encapsulate somewhat of a mini book, a mini series, and it would touch on everything in society. And I think that's what I want my art to be. I want it to be a representation of who I am as an individual, and show that I'm like, we are not one-dimensional beings. We have all of these hopes and visions and dreams, and it comes together to make us. So that's the space I want my art to occupy, and that's the representation I want it to have.
What are some of the places that you kind of turn to as you've been pursuing like your spoken word, your acting, even with this audio visual project that you're trying to put together? Like, where have you found help or support or collaborators in these projects?
Thankfully, there's a network of young visionaries who are now pushing themselves into the arts in a more professional way, in a way that is more branded and easily accessible. So when I came back to Antigua in 2012, thereabout, yes, I was introduced to August Rush Productions, which is Zara Errol and Linissa. Why am I forgetting Linissa
George,
Yes, yeah, their group, who they did everything from the vaginal monologues to spoken word productions called Expressions, where they invited people to present their poetry and present their songs and so on, perform basically in a very organic setting. And that sort of propelled me forward into writing, because even as a child, I used to write like little poems, writing for different competitions. But they allowed me to see writing as an art and not just another thing to do. And it was through them that I was introduced to a lot of other creatives who are doing things in the background that a lot of Antiguans and Barbadians perhaps are not aware of and not exposed to. So there's not this great appreciation for their hard work. And in the past 5 years, with the advent of Soothe, which is a neo soul and spoken word sort of event, and all of these other offshoots, we have seen more opportunities for people like me who do spoken word, who sing, to have a public and a national presence. And through small projects from the Department of Culture as well, there have been avenues open to me where I am exposed to different stages and different audiences. So that was the original foray into spoken word. Acting again, I had been doing it for quite some time, whether it be like small school productions or church things and so on. But coming back again, there were auditions for other major projects by the Department of Culture, by international directors who came to Antigua to put on productions, and I was successful, and I was able to participate in at least 6 major productions.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I've been lucky in some senses, but also positioning kind of helped, and networking helped as well in helping me to get opportunities that perhaps others didn't know about.
Kadeem, it has been such a treat talking to you. I guess we first met at like EcoZone camp. We were counselors there.
I was when Grayson mentioned who was doing the interview, I was like, wait, Yannick from camp?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were still a secondary school student then, and it's just amazing to see how much you've grown and blossomed. And if people want to find and follow you online and keep track of what you're up to, where would be the best place for them to do that?
Oh, Facebook. Facebook is perhaps the best place. I'm most active on there, despite my lack of activity. I'm most easily reached through Facebook, and if I'm posting any work, it would be through Facebook. Instagram to a lesser extent, but Kadeem Joseph on Facebook. And I think Deem_Joseph on Instagram. Yeah, I most of my work would be on Facebook and at events. I'm still waiting to be introduced to Twitter. I was on, but no, with medicine, like no, I can't possibly take on another social platform.
I hear that. Okay, Kadeem, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much. Hello again, podcast listeners and fans. You've made it to the end of another episode of Grassroots Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can show some love by spreading the love. And you can do that by sharing this episode on social media, or just good old-fashioned word of mouth will do just fine as well. If you have an idea for someone you want to see featured on this show, or topics that you'd like us to cover, you can hit us up at thenewgrassroots@gmail.com, and we are always so psyched to hear from you guys. So please go ahead, email us, let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see in the future. We want to hear all of it. If you are curious about the new Grassroots and what else we are up to, you can find us on social media. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook. If you search for the new Grassroots, you will certainly be able to find us and get engaged that way. I gotta give a big shout out and special thanks to Grace Ann James for co-producing this podcast, and also to Fanilla Francis, co-founder of the New Grassroots, and Zoe Teague for their help making the show happen and lining guests up for us. Really appreciate all the work that you guys have put into this, and of course really appreciate you, the listeners, the audience, because without you there would be no point in doing this. So thanks so much. Much love, peace, and later.